Hello, everyone. I'm Mary Judd, the co-founder and program director of Songwriting with Soldiers. Songwriting with Soldiers, for those of you who don't know, is a nonprofit organization based in Nashville, Tennessee. And our mission is to use the power of collaborative songwriting to build creativity, connections, and strengths. We do this primarily in person with retreats and online. Thanks to the pandemic pivot, we have increased our online offerings, and we do one-day retreats, online songwriting sessions, and a variety of other offerings, our creative community courses and special interviews like we have today. We do these retreats with military members and military veterans, active duty service members, and military families primarily. We have also piloted our program with groups outside of the military, just beginning that in order to see if our program is effective and impactful with other groups who can benefit from this powerful collaborative songwriting. So we are very excited today to welcome our special guest, Dr. Bessel Kolk, who many of you may know if you've seen this beautiful book in the bookstores or all over the world, selling for now 130 plus weeks on the New York Times bestseller list. And Bessel is also the founder and the director of the Trauma Center in Brookline, Massachusetts. He is a professor of psychiatry at Boston University Medical School, and the co-founder, or not the co-founder, the director of the National Complex Trauma Treatment Center, a renowned expert, in other words, worldwide in the treatment, the research and the treatment of trauma. And we are happy to talk with Bessel today because our work has blended somewhat. Bessel was introduced to us through Mary Gaucher, one of our songwriters who he's worked with, and Amy Spees, another one, and has been gracious and supportive enough to invite our team to the International Trauma Conference in Boston 2 times. So this is very exciting. Thank you, Bessel, for taking the time.
It's great to be here.
It's an honor to have you here. And I know many people in our community that includes military members, veterans, family members, and general population around the world is really excited for this interview. Many will watch it live and others will watch it recorded on our Songwriting with Soldiers Facebook page and our YouTube channel. So thank you.
Great.
I will dive in by asking you 2 questions about The Body Keeps the Score. One, have you been able to explain 130 plus weeks on the bestseller list?
Absolutely.
What is it about this book?
You know, it's been such a gigantic bestseller, translated into 38 different languages like Mongolian, Laotian, which we didn't expect. I have no idea. And I wrote to my publisher in jest, does this mean that I'm going to get the Nobel Prize in Literature? It's about as likely as Donald Trump getting the Nobel Prize in peacemaking.
Well, thank you for that. The title is captivating. The Body Keeps the Score. I'd like to see if you can tell people who are not familiar at all with the book a brief explanation. I mean, it's a long, fantastic book with stories. And yes.
Right.
What does that mean? The Body Keeps the Score.
That trauma is played out through the body, and it's not a cognitive event. It's not like, oh, if I've been stupid, I didn't understand it. It is not about talking so much. It's about your organism, your being is wired to feel in danger, and you feel like so your whole body reacts to ordinary things as if your life is threatened. And in the long range, it has devastating effects on people's lives. And there's this misunderstanding about trauma, and people think it's about something that happened a long time ago. That's where it starts. But it's not about a memory about the past. It's about how you become a different person, and your reality gets changed, and the way you see the world is different, and the way your body reacts to stuff. And so, a very important part of healing from trauma is to inhabit a body that feels safe and connected with other people.
Mhm. So in our work with veterans and active duty and military family members, that is a very well-known group to have suffered trauma. And
Right.
anyone who would go into combat, I mean, those are pretty very genuinely regarded traumatic experiences.
Right. But most of them have traumatic experiences even before joining the military, of course.
Mhm.
That for many people, joining the military is a way of escaping uh, very difficult circumstances. And so it is not just the combat trauma, but the whole
Right.
accumulation of things that causes that PTSD. Yeah.
Yeah, in your book, and I cannot recommend it enough to anyone, anyone who's curious about um, so much of the mind body relationship and our the ability to bounce back, the ability to grow through traumatic experiences as a result, and to have the right tools. One of the quotes that struck me in your book was from Mickey Hart, a member of the Grateful Dead. And he is part of a long-term study on the effects of music and rhythm on the brain. And he says, I'll quote from your book, "Life is about rhythms. We vibrate. Our hearts are pumping blood. We are a rhythm machine. That's what we are." Can you talk to us about that? What do you know
Absolutely.
about that, the rhythm? And
We have a new book that's coming out called Come to Your Senses. That is really very much all about rhythm and vibration because we are rhythmical creatures. And of course, the people who understand that was the Roman army general Lycurgus, later on revived by Prince Maurice of Nassau, who said if you work with soldiers, they need to move, they need to march, they need to sing. And of course, that's been always for good armies. That's the core of the training of a soldier: is you move and you sing and you march and you're in tune with each other. And once you are in rhythm with other people, you will sacrifice your life for each other. So,
Hmm.
and the word that's always missing is the word pleasure. And when I think about songwriting with soldiers, I go like, yeah, that's pleasure. Huh? And the nature of pleasure is when you're in sync with the people around you. And so right now I'm talking and you're smiling and you're nodding.
Mhm.
If you were sitting there stone faced, like a
Mhm.
psychoanalyst, and go, oh, and how do you feel about it? I would shut up uh,
Mhm.
because I depend on your rhythms
Mhm.
to reinforce me. And that's what life is all about. When you feel in tune with other people, when you have good vibrations with other people, you feel pleasure. And trauma is very much about losing that rhythmical connection with people.
Mhm. Yeah, well, as you know, but others may not know, our program is based on a lot of applications from the field of positive psychology and the pillars of happiness that are like long known: pleasure, engagement, and meaning. So we've structured our
But
program
rhythm is
around
left
that.
out of that. Huh?
Well, no, I would say
You know, I've
rhythm
had my
is,
trouble with positive
oh,
psychology because, life sucks a good amount of the time. Like,
well, well, that's a whole other subject we can go into, but it isn't denying the negative at all. It's being able to, as you show in your book, also really recognize the good and then start building tools to be able to play off it. So with our collaborative songwriting, just like you mentioned, where you have a professional songwriter whose mission at our retreat is to sit down and listen, and all of that mirroring that you're talking about and really listening, and together it's with, that's why we're songwriting with.
right,
It's a joint venture, so they are together working on telling a story and gathering the information from the participant, the veteran or the active duty member or the family member, and together they're working that out, and the rhythm comes in, the music is coming in. So that right there, I'll go on with how we take advantage of that, but can you talk about that? the benefits of connecting with another person in that manner, and literally with a rhythm, and
But
putting
it's
it to a beat.
rhythms and words.
Mhm.
And the songwriting is very much like, uh, but you have a sentence and you go, is that right? Huh? You have a sentence, is that right? Huh? Uh,
Mhm.
because trauma is basically a wordless state of being. You
Mhm.
just feel enraged, you just feel terrified, you just feel collapsed. But I happen to be part of the first team that did neuroimaging studies of trauma, and people don't really take these findings seriously, which they should. Is that when you're in your trauma, the whole speech center of the brain breaks down. There's nothing there.
Mhm.
And lately, the field has just discovered is that when you're in your trauma, the same area of the brain that allows you to speak also allows you to understand what other people are doing.
Mhm.
And when that breaks down, when you're in your trauma, you're out of tune with the people around you. Because the part of the brain that goes like, oh, when I scream at my wife, she feels terrible, maybe I shouldn't do that. That isn't working very well. So, because traumatized people get very egocentric, like I'm the hardest suffering person in the world, and that entitles me to do things to other people that hurt other people. So that empathy thing also
Mhm.
really isn't helped by trauma. And and these brain structures need to activate are brain structures where somebody sees what you see, what you feel, and finds words for it. They say, "Oh, that's what it feels like." Very
Mhm.
much what you do with when you have a little baby. Basically, working with trauma is like working with babies. Huh? You move together, you touch, you sing, you cradle, and you get rhythms together. Huh? But
Mhm.
saying, but a very important part of raising a kid is say, "Oh, this 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 is how I feel about something," or "I like this," or "This is what it's like for me." That's very much what parenting is about, and recovering
Mhm.
from trauma is also very much about finding words for the experience, and being a and words are a communal thing. So it's about your hearing my words and taking in your words and knowing, oh, that's what it's like for you. Now I get it.
Mhm.
And I see that it's a very important part of songwriting with soldiers is that, uh, you know, in our work, we have people do it more themselves and don't do it for people. I think I'm more of a fan of embodying it yourself rather than having other people embody it for you. Um, but finding those words and hearing yourself reflected, having people
Mhm.
say, "Oh yeah, that's what it's like." Can you hear? They got it. Huh? You can tell your family members like, these people know what I'm going through. Huh? Very important.
Right. One of our participants who's a Marine, a former Marine, and he's also a therapist at the Arkansas VA, Kevin Reeder, he described the feeling he had and that the other veterans have had when they see and hear their song being performed with other people. And he said it's a PSA, it's our post songwriting acceptance.
Aha.
And I thought that was so brilliant. And so it's kind of speaking to what you're talking to, that they feel they someone not only heard and helped them articulate it, but they're in it with them. And
Right.
I
And
think
that
that's we've been, oh, go ahead.
the critical issue is to put it in time. So what happens with a lot of veterans is that their identity becomes, I'm a combat veteran, even though combat may have been 30 years ago, and
Mhm.
that defines them. Huh? And that's not how it should be. You could say, oh yeah, and when I was 18, I was in Iraq, and that happened to be. And today, it's 2021, and I'm alive now, and I learned a lot from what happened in Iraq. But that's a long time ago.
Right.
But for traumatized people, that long time ago is happening right now. And
Mhm.
so you need to have something, and there's many ways of doing that that allows you to say, there it is. That was my experience then, and now we're going to move on. Huh?
Right. So we love to provide based on that collaborative songwriting gorgeous session right there. We use that because there's, as you can imagine, such an there's an increase in positive emotions because they, even at the same time, there's a relief and a exhaustion sometimes if they've really gone back to a painful
Mhm.
memory and then turned it into a song. but the connection made, and that the rhythm and the genuine contact and shared purpose and all those things we know that make us feel better, it's this strange mix. And so we provide sessions around those for more like meditation and fun ways to explore more like creativity, creative writing workshops, or we've had cooking, we've done tell your story through video, and our combat photographers will show how they tell the story. And so it's a real, just almost like a buffet of opportunities to keep connecting and building creativity. And I know in your book, you talk about how trauma can numb you and kind of flatline in a way the imagination. So why is it so critical to rebuild creativity?
See, I have an issue with what you're saying. You say positive emotions. That's sort of evaluative. Why are you guys afraid to use the word pleasure?
Oh, I'm not at all. Believe anyone who knows pleasure. Okay, we build the pleasures. Yes,
It's about pleasure. And
absolutely.
pleasure is a
Pleasure.
sensory experience.
Absolutely.
And rhythms are about sensory experience. Like, wow, I feel so good when you touch me this way. I feel so good when we move this way. I've seen that in songwriting with soldiers. And there's this sense of pleasure that people have.
Yes.
And,
Thank you for pointing that out. I will make any
no,
pleasure engagement
psychologists
meeting.
never
Love
talk
it.
about pleasure. They're
Yeah.
only evaluative. And they're terrified of talking about pleasure. Why are they afraid of pleasure? Because if you talk about pleasure, you need to go into the body. And psychologists love to be in their little heads.
Well, we have many people in our community who are studying, either are psychologists or studying to be, and I know many of them love the body also. I'll be in defense of that right now. I know you're not anti that at all. But let's talk about the importance of you are a master at it, of thinking outside the box, and creativity, how it expands your view of what's possible. And it's just such a necessary, it's a
Absolutely.
necessary strength and a need for us to create safe and fun, pleasurable situations to let it thrive.
Absolutely. And so creativity comes out of a sense of pleasure, safety, and openness. When you're traumatized, you're all scrunched up. You live in a traumatized body that's ready for the next blow. And when you are terrified or enraged, you are very uncreative.
Mhm.
And if you cannot be creative yourself, as for example also happens in kindergarten and foster care homes, etc., you need to have other people who open up your mind and to really give you a visceral experience, not a cognitive experience, but a visceral experience of, oh, it can be different. When
Mhm.
we move this way, when we ring our voices with other people, then my body feels different. So it's a journey of discovery. And when you're traumatized, you don't discover a lot because you are just too angry, upset, frightened to
Mhm.
let your mind wander. But if you don't have creativity, you're stuck. Huh? Let me
Right.
give you an example. I just came back I took a month sabbatical in Hawaii, and I had some real trouble coming back to the Berkshires. Turns out for good reason, because what's happening right now in the Berkshires, there's a big snowstorm. It's the end of April. Uh, and so this would be a terrible thing if you go to, God, there's a snowstorm. But you can go like, interesting, because a week from now, all the snow will be gone. And tomorrow it may be warm enough that I can go bicycling. But if you're too upset
Mhm.
about the fact that it's snowing right now, you don't think about, oh boy, wouldn't it be nice when the snow starts melting and to get my bicycle and to ride up that hill. You need to have imagination.
Right.
And opening up imagination is a critical thing. But how to
Mhm.
do that is, of course, very difficult because it oftentimes becomes very prescriptive.
Mhm.
And the nice thing about songwriting with soldiers is people just do it. It's not like you've got to do that, or you have to step up to the plate, which
Mhm.
makes you only more uptight. People just join you, and there's this pleasure, and
Mhm.
you meet these wonderful musicians who are inspired and who are uh, talented, and you go like, wow, that's me they're thinking about. Isn't that amazing?
Yeah, that is a huge pleasure. And to get people to feel safe enough to do that, to trust you enough, especially a lot of people who at first when they'll hear about us, like, what? I'm not going. What
Uh,
is that? Like kumbaya by the fire, too touchy feely.
oh yeah.
And then they get there and they realize because we really make an effort of, like you're saying, pleasurable setting, a beautiful setting, if at all possible, and taking away a lot of your routine so that you can relax and have time to opt into what you really do want to do that will
Yeah.
make you feel better.
Yeah.
And
And
mhm,
defensiveness is very much part of being traumatized. Uh,
mhm,
uh, when I talk to a group of people, I know exactly from people's body posture who is traumatized there. Because when you're not traumatized, people go like, "Wow, what's this guy saying? What a weird accent he has. Oh, wow, that's interesting." So you open. When you're traumatized,
mhm.
go, is he going to hurt me? Is he
Yeah,
going to do what people have always done to me? I don't
yeah.
trust this. Huh? And so trauma makes you very
Mhm.
closed out, closed up to new experiences. And then you get stuck.
Right.
So you've got to open up that curiosity.
Curiosity is another one of the other incredibly powerful strengths. And
Yeah.
we really try to emphasize that in our program. And I don't want to make this sound like it's a commercial for it, but it is fun to talk
Oh,
with you. It's a pleasure to talk with you about it because so much of it seems so easy on the surface. Um, and people often think pleasure, it's fluffy or it's not serious. We take it very seriously. So the connections at the retreat, I'm going to ask you about the importance of connections for people who have been in trauma or just in general isolated. Right now, so many people can relate to it because of this year of pandemic and isolation. It's crazy.
yeah.
How important is it for us to be able to build connections and keep them
Well,
going like we do after the retreats?
see, that's again, American psychology, Western psychology has this notion that we are individuals and we have our pathology, etc., etc. How important it is to have connection. When I've worked with people in Yemen, which is a very different culture, and when I ask them what happened to you, they cannot talk about what happened to them. They can say, "This is what happened to my village.
Mm,
This is what happened to my family." Uh, this notion that we are an individual self is a very late, largely American invention. Uh, but we are like, you know, I love to spend my time in zoos and looking at monkeys because I see ourselves reflected. We are like monkeys with a big forebrain. Uh, and monkeys don't live by themselves. We always live in community. And as long as we are part of the community, by and large, we are okay. Uh, so,
mm,
what happens to your veterans, who are the people they feel emotionally connected with, is not with their families. They're connected with their brothers, many of whom died. And that's
mhm,
their emotional connection because we all live in community with other people. And part of trauma in soldiers is that people get stuck in the community of their soldiers that is
mhm,
no more, and the heart is not opening up to new communities. So,
mhm,
in a very important way, an experience like songwriting with soldiers reestablishes new communities through pleasure, and not
mhm,
because pleasure is crazy. That's the drive for human beings. Uh,
mhm,
Life without pleasure is not worth living. And traumatized people are very pleasureless people. And
mhm.
paradoxically, they tend to get pleasure thinking about their trauma.
Mhm.
So they keep going back there, but they're close to anything else. So,
Right. That could be one of the reasons that this is so powerful because if you're writing about your trauma in a brand new way, like you're experiencing in this brand new way with another person turning it into a song, something beautiful, and it's surrounded by all these other wonderfully pleasurable and meaningful experiences, that all of a sudden it's redefining that. You
well,
have a new, this happened to me. Now it's associated with this song and this amazing person that listened to me and these other people that had similar experiences. And Now we're in this community together, watching two people on Zoom talk about it.
Right.
It just keeps
But
rippling forward.
you make these new relationships
Mhm.
because you create something new. We see that in our theater work that uh, people write their theater pieces about their trauma, and it's very painful, and they relive their trauma and stuff, and they put it out there, and then their internal focus shifts from their story to their performance.
Mhm.
And then you say, oh, now I can feel, sense, experience a new experience in my body of feeling alive and engaged.
Right. Yeah. There's so many great organizations out there doing similar work now that we
Yeah,
need to highlight. We need
all
to.
over the world actually. You know, we work with
Mhm.
Syrian refugees and in Somalia and people, and sooner or later people always discover the power of communal activity and song, which
Mhm.
is us as human beings. We need that. Yeah.
We do. It's such a great segue in a question that I definitely wanted to ask you, Bessel. Being someone who is so busy and has spent your life working in this field and sharing so much of it with others, what about you? What do you do to to keep yourself balanced and filled with pleasure that can motivate you forward and keep you strong? What are some of
Well,
your ways you stay
part of what
pleasure
a
and
large part of
engaged?
what I do is the pleasure in the work that I do. You know, excuse me. I was the first person who studied Prozac, and that's interesting. And then I was the first person to study EMDR, and that was interesting. And then I studied yoga, and that was interesting. And right now we are into psychedelics,
Right.
and we are creating a revolution that will completely change the world of psychology. And I happen to
Mm.
be part of that. I'm very delighted that to have been invited to join that group. And so that is very empowering. I don't get stuck on like so
Mhm.
many people who are in the trauma field are doing the same damn thing today as they did 30 years ago. Instead of saying, actually, it didn't work as well as I hoped for, they keep doing the same damn thing, you know. And our trajectory has been very much like, okay, we learned that's helpful, that was learned, that was helpful, they learned that. People get still stuck. So what else can do something? And so a very great source of pleasure and meaning for me is to always hook up with other people who are truly exploring and anew. So that's
Mhm.
other than that, I live in a beautiful place. I ride my bicycle. I play tennis. I hike, um, play music. Uh, all the things that I prescribe for other people.
And you know what makes you happy. So it's so important to know your pleasures so that you've got a good list when you can just like, okay, I'm ready. What's your one of your favorite songs?
You asked that question. I'm a musician. Like I have a million favorite songs. Like,
Okay.
how about the Kyrie eleison of Bach B minor Mass?
Mm. What do you love about that? Can you
That
say,
is
or is
that
it just
fills the universe. It's God in music. Like that's the ultimate of transcendental experience. But I'm fine with writing on the city of New Orleans. Like there are so many songs. Um,
good? Have you ever met anyone who has no interest in music?
yeah, yeah. It's interesting and really important for us to be aware of that. I know people who are not stirred by music, and that makes life a much harder thing for you because there's something missing. I know people who have no visual memory,
Hmm.
cannot visualize things. Kind of like, wow, that must be a very. It's like not having a leg, you know. That you can compensate for it, but there's certain, and again, early childhood trauma can rewire some of these things. So things that are supposed to come online don't come online.
Mhm.
And then the question is, if somebody gets disturbed by music, how much work should you put into opening up that musical vein, or do you accept, okay, this person does the music, we do something else? And I don't know what the answer is. But you're a hell of a lot better off if you get stirred by music. As Shakespeare pointed out, he knew everything. Yeah.
Well, you are pioneering so much important work that is making a difference in like it's unfathomable how many lives, the gazillions of books that you've sold. are just scattering seeds and inspiring so many people. And I'm sure I speak for many people, Bessel, in being deeply grateful for you, to you, for the time you've put in, the questions that you've pursued.
Pleasure is mine. It was not a sacrifice.
Well, thank you. You've inspired us. You have been a tremendous source of inspiration and support, and really look forward to keeping in touch with you and being able to let our community know what this next book, when it comes out. Hopefully we'll be able to have you at one of our retreats in person
Nice,
sometime.
yeah. Yeah, I love you guys. You're doing great work, and I know I've seen what happens. It is, and that sense of community is so important, and that sense of community is through being seen, being known, being resonated with, being reflected. It's great. Yeah.
Thank you.
Hey,
I wish I had a song that we could like dance out on.
it's okay.
We'll just go to the rhythm of our own little
Right.
hearts.
All right.
Thank you, Bessel.
You're welcome.
Thank you,
you.
everyone, for tuning in.